try to maintain the improvements in the learning environment, meaning the culture, those sessions were definitely way less combative. And measuring success in, I think, a way that, and I think in years previous, it's like bring the tears. If you're not bringing the tears, you know, it's not effective. It is okay if emotion is part of these conversations, and actually I see people get emotional in conversations about lots of different things. The diversity-related conversations, I think, are different. But controversy in and of itself is not the objective. Okay, why would it be? That doesn't make sense. The objective is that you learn about how these different diversity competencies may or may not impact the way that you behave. And implicit in those sometimes, I think, is some emotion and are some hard topics. But that's not what the measure of success, I think, in a way has been before. Connect our diversity program more closely to the academic impact model. And you saw this in the pre-reading that we did, which I think makes sense. I think it makes sense to core members too. You know, there's a body of knowledge, skills, and mindsets. Very much implicit in those mindsets, especially, would be the diversity-related competencies. They live down there on that layer as well. Have a dialed-up focus on race and class. Now, this is where we basically are making the biggest adjustments this year. What was interesting, and it was really fascinating to sit in sessions last year, because we had such a focus, a really clear focus on backwards design. And, you know, the principles of investment. Core members were sitting in these conversations that were supposed to be about diversity, and we asked core members things like, you know, what would you do if you got this student that was coming in really low performing? And actually, let's even show a writing sample from a high performing classroom. Remember those stances? And what we expected people to say is like, gosh, I bet I'm going to have a hard time maintaining expectations for this student. I bet I'm going to want to slip into a sense of complacency and think that this student could no way get to this other level. Instead, they were just like, I'm going to backwards design. I'm going to write a test, which is awesome on the one hand. It was like they were like completely like, whoosh. And I would have to say, no. I want you to think about how you might be feeling like on an emotional level when you have a student who may or may not share your background, but who is so underperforming, 2-3 years behind. Are you really telling me that your gut instinct is that, oh, they can absolutely get to this other place that we showed? And the writing samples we showed were like, which I think is pretty darn realistic. Now, one could say, you just don't know until you know, and I think there's some truth to that. You know, but it was like, until we really said to core members, no, I want you to think about what seeing that difference might do to you on an emotional level, how what you think, basically the way you've been programmed up until this point, about what people of color and people from low-income communities can do, until we just basically ask them that directly. It's like they didn't want to know that, which I think is pretty normal. Like, they're just like, I didn't want to go there. Plus, I've been told, like, when, you know, in order to, you know, plan rigorous instruction, I do this, which is great. It was like, okay, you've definitely mastered that stuff. Fantastic. But it was like they would not go there in their minds unless we basically asked the point of question. And so this year, the questions are going to be more direct. You know, given that everyone in this room, regardless of background, lives, if you've grown up in America, and maybe if you've grown up in the world, you have been inundated with messages that basically say that people of color and people from low-income communities are not capable at the same level that other people are. We have all been inundated with these messages, and they are there. They're that cloud, that slog. And unless we're asked to really think about them, we might not want to, and so we might just not. So this year we're going to ask people to think about that. And then also give some really sort of nuanced examples. And actually, you're going to look in a few minutes at a couple of scenarios that I think you're going to see like there's layers in the scenarios that we're giving you. It's not just, you walk into a school, you're the only white teacher, how do you think this might play out? It's going to be a whole bunch of different, because it's rarely that simple. It's rarely that simple. We're also going to give examples, because one of the things too, actually, if I could just rewind for a second, one of the things that actually core members of color in particular cited as disappointing about DCA prior to 2008 is they actually felt like it was aimed towards the education of white core members, and they were sort of there to back up the curriculum. They were there to validate why white core members needed to think about this, which made actually both white core members and core members of color uncomfortable. And also core members of color said, I imagine that there are also things that I need to be thinking about, and it doesn't seem like it's aimed for me. I feel like I'm sort of a spectator, and then every once in a while I'm called upon to say, So core members who share the identity of their students, core members that are from the exact same community, maybe they grew up in the exact county they're teaching in, and are still grappling with issues of difference and sameness. So they're going to be much more complicated, and they're going to be messier. CSs, you might be thinking something right now, harder to facilitate. See, that's right. Maybe it is harder to facilitate. And I want to ask all of us right now, as people who participate in these sessions, that yes, your CS is the lead facilitator, they will rehearse and whatever, but you play a critical role in this. And really, we all work together to make this happen because they are harder to facilitate than a conversation on lesson planning. Yes, they are. You know, and let's just put that out there. So I want us to all be committed to making this work. The sessions are designed quite well. I think the practices for you all is designed quite well. You know, so, but, you know, it's hard to facilitate something when you know, like, people in the room are grappling and, like, sort of confused themselves, which the examples almost aim to do in some ways, to really make people kind of like, oh my gosh, there's so much going on. It's hard to guide people's thinking from a facilitator standpoint. Okay. Yeah.
I'm just a little confused because when I'm thinking back to my institute experience, the CMAs didn't say anything. The CSs just said stuff, and the CMAs sometimes weren't even there. So is that different now? Are we saying things? Or?
No, you're not facilitating parts of the session, but CMAs do attend DCA. You don't attend both in a day, but you attend one or the other. And then typically in sessions, there's like table facilitation, and so CMAs, you will be helping to guide conversations. You'll participate, but given that you're a staff member, you will help to make sure that conversation is going in the right direction and people are thinking about the things they need to think about. And then there are also places actually in all of the sessions, not just DCA, where it says things like, please have a staff member share an example or anecdote from their classroom, in which case the CS would directly coordinate with the rest of the staff members to say, hey, can you talk about that classroom management plan? The classroom management sessions are the same. One more question.
Is there going to be, I know last summer we had an evening one with our CS, at least one. Is that still?
So it's looking back, thinking forward, life maps. We're actually still debating. We're pretty sure it's not going to be till week 2. But yeah, typically. And it's different than DCA sessions, sort of these formal sessions, but it's essentially life maps, which CMAs have found really helpful. I think it helps core members on a number of, I think it helps the group to bond. I think it's also pretty eye-opening because it's one of those, you don't know until you walk a mile in someone else's shoes. And I think every time I do it, I'm reminded of, like, it's just so funny. We look at someone and we cast them as a character in our minds, and then you're shocked that they went through something that you would have never imagined or whatever.